All right, we'll call the meeting to order. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to the redevelopment meeting. This is the December 13, 2022 redevelopment meeting. The meeting is called to order in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act. Annual notice of this meeting was provided to the Home News Tribune, the Star Ledger, and the Highland Park Planet on January 5, 2022. In addition, notice of this in-person meeting was mailed to the Home News Tribune, the Star Ledger, and the Highland Park Planet on December 9th, 2022, and was posted on the Borough website at www.hpborough.com and on the bulletin board at Borough Hall, 221 South 5th Avenue, Highland Park, New Jersey, on December 29, 2022, and has remained continuously posted as required by law. Fire exits are to the left and the right of the council chambers. When we reach the public portion, please speak into the microphone if you come up to make a statement. As the council president, I preside over this redevelopment meeting in the absence of the mayor, who is unavailable tonight. I may interrupt, warn, or terminate a participant's statement or participation in the meeting if the participant's statement does not adhere to the 3 minutes provided to each participant for public comment, or if the statement is disruptive to the orderly conduct of the meeting, repetitive, or not on a topic relevant to the borough governing body. We request that if you've had an opportunity to speak once, that you wait until everyone else has had an opportunity to speak for one time before you come back up to the microphone. I'd ask the borough clerk to conduct a roll call at this time.
Mayor Bromittler, Councilwoman Canavera, Councilwoman Foster.
Here.
Councilman George.
Here.
Councilman Hale.
Here.
Councilmember Hirsch.
Here.
Councilwoman Kim Chohan. Special Counsel Bauman.
Here.
Planner Jim Constantine. And Borough Administrator Hovera.
Here.
All right, this time we'll call for a special presentation of the downtown parking study and a recommended parking program plan by Jerry Giosa of Level G Associates. Welcome, Jerry, and thank you for your report.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Ready to roll?
I'm ready.
Okay.
We're ready. We all want to hear what you have to say.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Jerry Giosa. My company is Level G Associates. I've been doing parking studies for over 35 years, pretty much throughout the United States, but more so concentrated in the New York, New Jersey, tri-state area. So I'm going to get right into the slide deck. We have 25 slides, and we're going to go through what we found in downtown Highland Park in terms of parking conditions. So the purpose of the report was to analyze parking conditions in the downtown, to establish a baseline condition for use in modeling the impacts of parking system changes, including those related to future redevelopment. Now, that's a very important piece of our task here, and we've pretty much gotten there. We have excellent baseline in order to model and build various models of redevelopment, different structures to overlay that. And then to correct any existing unhealthy parking conditions to the extent that they exist. So the study process started with a review of previously prepared reports and documents. And there were several of them that we did a detailed review of. We had meetings with borough officials and professionals along the way. We conducted a parking inventory of the parking supply. We conducted occupancy counts of the number of cars parked in each parking facility on a representative cross-section of days, including Fridays, Wednesdays, we actually did 2 Fridays, Saturday and a Sunday. We did general observations of the parking supply by myself and other senior members of the firm. We conducted a parking survey, which asked a number of questions about your thoughts, attitudes, habits, patterns with respect to parking. We had 893 responses. And we prepared a draft parking management plan. This is the full report right here. And what we're doing is we're summarizing the results of this parking study tonight, and we're presenting it to you for input and feedback. So this is a step to get to finalizing the report. Are we going to stop for questions, or do you want to just roll right through it?
I think let's
We have-
save the questions for the end of your presentation.
Okay, sounds good. So here were the,
about handouts?
Excuse me, Council President? May I just throw some, I think I overheard, there was a question about copies, and we can certainly make the slide deck available after the presentation
Yeah,
on the website.
okay. So I'm pretty much reading verbatim from all these points, so you're getting the gist. The previous studies that were conducted, one was by the Blaustein School over at Rutgers, one by an individual named Ruka Patare, Alan Schechtel, a professional planner, and the borough's own parking study group. So what were some of the conclusions of those previous studies? First, on-street parking spaces, especially on Raritan Avenue, exhibit significantly higher occupancy rates than the off-street parking lots. We found that too. Large private parking lots often have many vacant spaces. This is obvious to many as you drive around. You see the people clamoring for spaces on Raritan Avenue, yet there's open spaces in private lots. Special purpose private lots, such as those serving churches and synagogues, are heavily utilized during services and or special events, but remain largely vacant at other times. And the borough's study regarding the effectiveness of imposing a 2-hour parking time limit on Raritan Avenue was inconclusive. Now, this report was conducted by, I believe, police personnel and others within the borough, and they went through their study process, and at the end, there was too much indecision about the 2-hour time limit, so there was no conclusions drawn at the end of that study. The Blaustein study recommended installing parking meters on Raritan Avenue and to form a parking benefit district. So the meters would create a revenue source that could be used to fund new projects and other improvements throughout the downtown area. And also the Blaustein study recommended recognizing shared parking that will in turn allow for the relaxation of minimum parking standards for new redevelopment projects. And that's not new. That's written in zoning codes all over New Jersey. It's a common dynamic and standard that's recognized throughout a number of publications by the Urban Land Institute, the Institute of Transportation Engineers, and the sharing of parking and how different land uses use parking supplies has been now widely documented, and there's plenty of quantitative evidence out there to analyze and model how different land uses can share a common parking supply. So that was an excellent recommendation, and from my understanding, the borough has gone ahead and adopted some of those, or recognizes now, those shared parking dynamics. So here was the study area. You can see the green spine right down the middle is Raritan Avenue, running from the river to Woodbridge Avenue on the east, and that is its own zone. You can see it represented with RA there, Raritan Avenue. We have 4 other zones in addition to the Raritan Avenue corridor. The light blue zones we call transition zones because they are transition areas between Raritan Avenue and the residential districts. So the residential district to the north is basically defined by Denison Street, and the residential district to the south is defined by Magnolia. So those were basically the 5 study zones. You can see outlined in the transition zones, the blue areas, all those outlines are the various parking lots. And you can see the large parking areas, the supermarket parking lot, the Rite Aid lot, the Polo slots, throughout the, you can see that on that diagram. So what were our key findings after doing all our counts and inventory, having our meetings, reviewing all the reports? So the peak parking demand was measured, not surprisingly, on Friday at 1 p.m. when the farmers market is in full swing. These counts were done in October, which is a typical count month. Okay, you typically don't want to count in holiday season or the summer season, so you get good representative data in October, and the farmers market was in full swing. We had beautiful weather, sunny and seasonable on both of those Fridays, and we found that the peak count was 111 cars, or 14.5% higher than the Wednesday 1 p.m. count. So we had a real bubble, a real spike in parking demand on Fridays when the farmers market was in town. We found that available parking spaces along Raritan Avenue, especially between 2nd and 6th, can be hard to come by. They're very difficult to find. We also found, based on our observations and counts, that approximately 20 to 25 spaces in the Rite Aid lot and 25 to 30 spaces in the Stop and Shop lot can be safely shared with downtown parkers without compromising parking spaces intended for the store's employees and customers. So that kind of opens a door for a dialogue with those property owners in terms of possibly sharing some of the parking spaces in those lots. Now we have data that supports not just an anecdotal thought, we have data now that supports that sharing of the parking supply can be done without compromising the effectiveness of their parking supply. We did do the counts while we were pulling out of the COVID-19 pandemic. Downtowns in New Jersey have fared pretty well. They bounced back quickly. I have a number of customers in New Jersey. We're pretty much in active downtowns. We're pretty much back to pre-pandemic parking demand levels. We did do a review of Google Earth images from 2019 and previous. We compared them with the counts that we did in October, and we found them to be very similar. So although we can never say that there's no impact from COVID, we don't think that that there's a material difference between the counts that we conducted and the parking demand that was being experienced during pre-COVID conditions. So we noticed there were some parking areas that might be candidates for improving the parking supply. One of them is the rear of the borough's South 3rd Avenue lot, where it abuts with the Rite Aid lot. It's kind of an awkward juncture there, and we feel that possibly those areas can be merged to create maybe 10, 15, possibly up to 20 additional parking spaces. We always check the efficiency of the parking layouts of the municipal lots. Very often we'll find that aisle widths are too wide, or parking spaces are angled when they don't have to be, and that we could find efficiency in a restriping exercise. We didn't find that in Highland Park. Your existing lots are laid out in a relatively efficient fashion, so we weren't able to find any additional spots in that fashion. The Raritan Avenue parking supply, when compared to the parking supply on other corridor commercial corridors in New Jersey is somewhat compromised because of oversized no parking zones intended to allow vehicles to pull directly into parallel parking stalls rather than using reverse maneuvers. This does improve traffic flow, probably, but it does limit or compromise your parking supply. You could use a more traditional parking layout and pick up some spaces along Raritan. We'll have more on that later. About 84.6% of the cars parking along Raritan park for less than 2 hours. So thinking about a 2-hour time limit, which you see in many downtowns throughout New Jersey, Long Island, Connecticut, all over the United States, it's pretty much a standard. And the reason it's done is to promote turnover of the parking supply. So we did a duration analysis to find out how long are folks parking for. Almost 85% are parking for less than 1 hour. So, you know, in my mind, in my experience, the corridor, the Raritan Avenue corridor, would be well served by a 2-hour time limit. And that's there's some evidence now to show that you know, most of the parking trips that are occurring today will still be accommodated even when there's a 2-hour time. During peak conditions, it's estimated that about 14 cars on Raritan Avenue are parking for durations in excess of 4 hours. And these cars most likely belong to downtown apartment dwellers or employees. So there are some cars that are clogging up the parking supply, not creating turnover, and we've quantified what that number is. It's about 10%. So what are our results? We have about 1,600 parking spaces, and the peak that we found, as I mentioned earlier, the Friday is the blue line, was found to be at 1 p.m. and there are about just about 900 cars parked in the 1,600 space parking supply that was counted in the entire study area, Raritan Avenue, the transition zones, and the residential zones. The remarkable thing about this graph, I've rarely seen it in my career, is how tight the limits are, the upper and lower limits. It's a very tight range of parking. Usually you'll see you know, more ebbs and flows of demand throughout the day, but we basically have shared parking happening, and we've stayed in a very tight range even throughout the various days, the Friday, the Wednesday, the other Friday, the Saturday, and the Sunday, all within basically a 300 car range up or down. So let's look at the various lots. The top graph is the North 6th lot, and you can see there's 18 spots in that lot, and the most we observed was 14. You can see the peak there at 12 noon on the Friday. We had a secondary peak on the Sunday, which is the orange bar. We found 12 cars parked in the lot. There was still 6 open spots, but you know, you can see that lot you know, gets some action, but you know, not overwhelming. The South 3rd lot, that's a different story. We get some good action there, especially during Fridays and Wednesdays. Basically, that lot is considered full. There's 17 spots. We found 16 cars parked at 12 and noon on Friday and a Wednesday, and that one open spot was a handicap spot. This is the farmer's market lot. We have to show you 2 graphs to explain what's going on here. The top graph is for the Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday counts. The bottom graph is for Friday. Okay, so on a non-farmer's market day, you can see that the peak condition was encountered on Sunday at 11 a.m. with that's the gray bars there, where we found about about 47 cars parked in the 71 space lot. So that's, in our estimation, that demand is related to the church. Also on Saturday, that's the orange bar there. That was the second highest recording. And then you can see on Wednesday, we also think that the church influence had an event. On a Wednesday evening, you can see those bars starting to climb 5, 6, and 7 p.m. But still, you know, there were always at least 20 spots open in the lot, and more often quite higher than 20 were available in that lot. However, on Farmers Market Day, they close most of the lot, but they leave one section open in the back, close to Magnolia, and that section has about 26 spots. So that's why the supply line, the dash line, stays at 26 throughout the day, and then when they close the farmer's market, they open the lot up at about 6 p.m., and now the available supply goes up to 71 spots, and that's why you see that kind of jagged dash line there indicating the parking supply in that lot. And on that Friday, you can see that it was actually parked over capacity in that back section because you had cars double parked and cars making deliveries for the farmers market and so forth. So it's not surprising that activity related to the farmers market created these conditions. Excuse me. So what did we have in the residential zone? So we had all accounts broken out: Raritan Avenue, transition zones, residential zones. In the residential zones, we have a classic U-shaped curve here. So basically, folks are home in the morning, they leave their houses to either run errands or go to work, and then they return in the evening. So that's a classic pattern that you'll see in a residential area. Again, a very tight range of data samples. Interesting, one of the effects of the pandemic. Normally we would see a deeper U, but now with folks working from home, that U has gotten more shallow. Now, I don't know if it's pandemic related or just related to the unique character of Highland Park, but we have quantified what the effect is of the parking patterns in the residential areas. We have quantified that. In the transition zones, we have more of a classic downtown parking pattern where the peak is kind of midday. And you can see again very tight range of data samples here. And Raritan Avenue, you can see that we have about 118 spots along Raritan Avenue, and on the Friday peak, we actually had over 100 cars parked. During these times, in certain sections, there were basically no spots to be found. And then on the various days, you can see that Sunday, which is the green line, there's usually spots to be found. Saturday, I want to point out, which is the gold line there. We have kind of a second peak at 7 p.m., which is a good thing. That means you have some nightlife happening. So you can see we peaked at lunchtime around 1 o'clock. Demand fell off, and then at 7 o'clock, we had a secondary. We did a congestion study for the on-street spaces. And that's basically you take the available parking hours on each block side, and you divide it by the number of times we observe those block sides to be parked in excess of 90%. So 90% is an important threshold in parking analysis, because that's basically considered the practical capacity of a parking facility. So the number of available hours divided by the number of times that block side was parked over at 90% gives us the congestion factor. And not surprisingly, Raritan Avenue was the winner with a 38% congestion factor, followed by the residential north zone, which we found on a Friday to be close to 20%. Saturday, about 16%. But again, Raritan Avenue clearly was the most congested. The residential south zone barely even recorded on the graph here, and I'll show you another slide that kind of indicates these congestion factors. So this is called a heat map, and basically the heat map is, this one is for the Friday 1 p.m. peak, and for each of the parking lots that each of the parking areas that we studied are indicated on the map, and if that parking area is indicated in red, it means it was 90% or higher occupied. It means it was quote unquote full. The gold facilities were 75 to 89% occupied, which means they were well utilized, but you'd be able to find a spot there. 50 to 74% are the green lots. You can see the Rite Aid lot and the Stop and Shop lot are in that classification. And then lower than 50% occupied, plenty of open spots there. You can see the south residential zone, which on the previous slide you saw was the lowest in the congestion study. Very blue. There's lots of open spots along streets in that zone. But again, the story here are the red areas, which are quote unquote full along Raritan Avenue, pretty much between 2nd and 6th. The farmers market lot, the back 1/3 of it there, was actually over capacity. The south third lot was red. It was full except for the one handicap stall. And then there were spots up by the high school that were parked in excess of 90%. And over here down at the west end, there was a block site here that we believe gets some commuter parking action. So then we did a survey, and the survey had 13 questions, and it was online. We used Google Forms. Most of the respondents did respond using Google Forms, although we did have paper surveys available that you could pick up here at Borough Hall, fill them out, hand them in. I think we had them in the library and some other places as well. About 77% of we had 893 responses, as I mentioned earlier. About 77% of the survey responses were from Highland Park residents. We found that the majority of respondents, almost 75%, believe the current parking supply is adequate or fine as it is, while 23% believe that more parking is needed. So there's a division in terms of the adequacy of the current parking supply. About 10% of the survey responses were from downtown business owners or employees, and these individuals reported that customers or visitors complain about parking rarely or never 50% of the time, a few times a month 23% of the time, or almost every day 26% of the time. The usual mode of transportation for folks taking the survey, 64% typically drive to downtown, 33% walk. That's an excellent modal split, by the way. Usually don't see it that high in a kind of suburban atmosphere like Highland Park. In terms of parking availability, 37% of the respondents said when they come to town, they could usually find a spot. 31% said it can be hard to find a spot at certain times. 26% said I can always find a spot. In terms of usual parking location, 47% Raritan Avenue. So everyone wants to park on Raritan Avenue. So, very few will just roll down Raritan and turn onto one of the side streets where there's open parking. They want to park on Raritan. That's clear. It was clear from the survey. So 47% usually park on Raritan. 24% park on a side street off Raritan. 12% in a private lot, and just 8% will seek out parking in one of the borough lots. Asked about the need for time limits on Raritan, 54% said no, 30% said yes, 16% were not sure. At the end of the survey, there was a section for you to write comments, just open thoughts on parking in downtown, and we found that the responses really were divided. And the topics that that were the most divisive were whether downtown should have a parking garage or not. So some want a garage, others don't want a garage. Parking meters. Some want parking meters. Most do not want parking meters. There were a group that did say that parking meters are needed. In terms of redevelopment, we had pro-development comments and anti-redevelopment comments, and they were approximately evenly split. Time limits on Raritan Avenue, we already kind of discussed that point already. And I guess there's been talk previously about eliminating crossed-out spaces on Raritan Avenue, some of those large no parking zones that we talked about for maneuvering. The residents are split on that. Some say get rid of those large X's and make more spaces, and others like them because it's easier to pull in and out. In terms of related comments, we had some good feedback from folks saying that downtown needs pedestrian and bike improvements. 47 commented along those lines. The need for more handicap spaces and the need for better signage for parking. So these are comments that are kind of related with complete streets type improvements that your downtown can certainly benefit from. In terms of the redevelopment plan, excuse me, I'm not used to talking extended periods. We have Track A, Track B, Track C, and Track D identified on this map. It's our understanding that Tracks A, C, and D will likely meet will be meeting their parking requirements on site. For Track B, which is the smallest of the four, their parking will likely be provided off-site on Track D. That's the thinking at this time. And after the redevelopment of Track C, which is the farmer's market lot, the existing demand from the farmer's market lot will likely be accommodated either on-site in an expanded South 3rd Street parking lot, which could be expanded with the Rite Aid merge, as we were discussing before, or possibly on Track D. So there are options of where that parking demand, if it is dislocated from the site, where it could be relocated. So now we start getting into the parking program plan recommendations. I just want to make some important distinctions before we get into the to the various recommendations. The recommendations are based on the study results. They're based on feedback from borough officials. They're based on feedback from the parking survey that we did. They're based on parking management best practices, which we've seen implemented in similar downtowns that we've had positive results with, and my own past experience in conducting similar studies. These recommendations can be implemented, partially implemented. They could be pilot programs, so we could give it a try and see how it works. They could be delayed, adjusted, or rejected. So these are basically recommendations from an outside consultant. I'm a cold eye coming in. I'm just telling you what I'm seeing based on my experience, based on parking industry best practices, what I believe would benefit your downtown. As an example of delaying or adjusting programs, the implementation of certain recommendations can be dependent. For example, if we go with a 2-hour parking limit along Raritan to try to improve turnover, and yet we find that that congestion persists, it may be time to start giving parking meters more serious consideration. I'm going to get right into the recommended program. I'm going to go through these points. I think there are 13 altogether, and then we'll be wrapping it up. So the first one was an easy one. There are no 15-minute spots in front of the post office. You see that in pretty much every downtown where there's the post office. You need those quick in and out spots. So I'm recommending you take the 3 spots right in front of the post office and convert them to 15-minute time limit. On Raritan Avenue, we found that a lack of parking time limits does not promote turnover of high demand spaces, in turn reducing parking opportunities. So again, the first line of defense, 2-hour time limit. I believe it makes sense. I believe you will see a discernible impact in a positive direction if a 2-hour time limit is implemented. The third one, and it's again in line with the Blaustein recommendations, are the implementation of the installation of parking meters, which again promotes parking turnover, creates a revenue stream that can be siphoned back into the district to do improvements or even increase the parking supply. The oversized zones, we're recommending that we reduce some no parking zones. It's not just the X'd out areas between the stalls. There are some areas with some very long tapers. There are some really wide driveways that don't seem to really serve any particular building. So between those X'd out areas, the long tapers and the driveways, we believe that you could pick up about 18 spaces along Raritan Avenue, still using best practice layouts. In the western portion of the study area, we found that New Brunswick commuter parking activity is creeping into residential neighborhoods. One thing we could do is we can implement commuter-friendly parking along Lincoln and River Road to try to siphon some of that demand out of the neighborhoods. We can also look at creating regulations that would discourage commuter parking in those neighborhoods. Along River Road, we felt that there was a good opportunity to create a gateway for southbound motorists coming into town. So there's also a chance to possibly pick up some parking along that through those improvements. In the residential zones where commuter or central business parking activity is creeping into residential neighborhoods, and it's been kind of identified here. These communities can be engaged to discuss possible residential parking permit zones where only residents can park in those districts during certain times. The South Third lot, we think that we could definitely pick up parking there with an expansion either at the back merging with Rite Aid or possibly to the south. It can be expanded in that direction. And that the expansion of that lot, which can, depending on what footprint is used, that lot could probably be expanded for anywhere from 20 to 40 spaces. And those additional spaces can give us some leeway in terms of redevelopment, temporary parking during construction of certain components of the redevelopment plan. And so putting that into effect can give us some options in terms of phasing some of that construction. The private lots, again, I mentioned the underutilized private parking lots that we all know about. We've recommended that we begin a dialogue with those property owners to possibly come up with some shared parking dynamics there. And the central business district, again, the survey indicated.
I want to do another slide.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
In the central business district, survey indicated the desire for more handicap parking. So I believe the borough should explore adding some handicap stalls to the side streets, which the borough controls. And the 2-hour parking limits and parking meters, if we go there, will need to be enforced. So through shared services, it's possible that a neighboring community such as New Brunswick, the parking authority there, can assist in providing some enforcement of any new parking regulations. And I just added one more slide here about the X'd out areas. This shows the different types of improvements in terms of picking up more parking supply. Type 1 is reduce or eliminate curb cuts. Type 2 is reduce no parking zones or intersection tapers. And number 3 is using a skipjack parking layout instead of the large X'd out parking areas that you have. And the skipjack layout is illustrated on the right there. And this is a picture taken on Schuyler Avenue in Morristown, near the courthouse. And you can see they still have a striped out area between the stalls. It's just not as big. So it's a shared area that helps maneuvering, and you still do have to do a reverse maneuver to get into that stall, but it is a more efficient layout. Also, you can see here where there's a driveway, it's kind of just a small taper here instead of a huge setback. Same thing with the crosswalk. Again, that's about 30 feet, which is standard, but here in Highland Park, it seems that all of these dimensions have been exaggerated. So if we go to more standard, commonly employed dimensions for on-street parking layout, again, I think we could pick up about 18 spots, which would also have an impact on the parking experience of folks using Raritan Avenue. And that's it for tonight, and happy to answer any questions.
Questions from council? Thank you, Mr. Giosa. If we can just have a few minutes, or there's a public questioning in a few moments, so if you'd wait for that. But right now, are there any questions from council members about the report?
Thank you, Mr. Gioso. I really appreciate it. One thing that, so much of what we learn about parking here is anecdotal and also experiential. My personal experience is that there is an ease of parking, but it sounds like that we're not nearly at capacity. of what the town currently demands. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Is there a way to determine how, and again, we hear things and also document things about commuter parking, folks who park on Raritan Avenue or side streets for 12 hours and then walk and take the train to the city. Is there any way to quantify how severe that problem is, or how we can, get a better picture of what, if that is a problem?
Yeah, we think it's modest. We don't think it's an overwhelming problem. We think it exists to an extent. We can take a closer look at it, but again, the evidence that we found didn't, suggested that a lot of the residents like to leave their cars on the street. So a lot of those, those side streets, Adelaide and so forth are, we found those are pretty much a lot of resident cars, overwhelmingly, yes.
Thank you for the presentation. It was very informative. I do have a question about the crossed out areas that we have, those blocks of areas for ease of driving into or exiting. Because Raritan Avenue is a state highway, would we have an issue? We'd have to get special permission from DOT to take those spaces out?
You would, but there is precedent in New Jersey for downtowns that those changes can be made. It's not like the state is that the borough is powerless to approach the state to make those changes. We can.
So that would be a part of whenever we approach them, that we would be able to take out some of these. And what about some of the cutouts? Would that also be put into that package, that we want to narrow our cutout spaces and create more, maybe possibly handicap spaces in those? So that would be a part of that same package that we would present.
I would do it all together, kind of as and Terry knows a lot about this stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Streets program, kind of put it all in one package to let the state know this has been well thought out. There's precedent for it. It's been done this downtown, that downtown, and they've been operating safely for years in those formats. And so, I think it's worthwhile if we want to go in that direction.
I have a question, Mr. Gioso, and thank you for the study. I chaired the Borough Council sponsored group, and the indecision on 2-hour parking was a split of opinions where nobody could agree, and it's basically exactly what you concluded. My question, a couple of questions. Elimination of curb cuts has been part of our redevelopment plan since 2005, but has a lot to do with property owners opting into the program. But the X's were there so that traffic can pull in, because I think you can imagine the congestion when I lived here in the 70s, when people were actually having to stop and back up into parking spaces along a one-lane state highway with 22,000 mileage or 22,000 trips a day. So I'm just wondering, as Councilman Hurst asked, if we're up to capacity, whether part of the plan is necessary along Raritan to eliminate those X's. Is it necessary?
That's an excellent question. And again, as a cold eye looking from the outside, I would say no, it is not necessary, because we found that there are spaces available on the side streets just a few steps further away. So, to sacrifice an amenity that is helping to ease congestion, for a few extra spots that would be convenient, a little more convenient, it's a big step. It's a big step to take.
Thank you.
We saw the the conditions around 5 o'clock, all the through traffic coming through. I think what would happen is if we did go narrower, we did go to a narrower stripe pattern, folks are going to say, I'm not backing up this whole, it's a congested corridor at that, during rush hour periods, for sure. I think people would, I mean, you're gonna get some folks that are gonna do it, but I think folks would not be inclined to do a reverse maneuver during rush hour conditions.
Thank you.
Some will.
Thanks. Yes, ma'am.
One of the recommendations you have is on Lincoln and River commuter-friendly parking. What is that? What is a commuter-friendly? How does that? What is that?
It's spaces with there's a long time limit.
Okay.
That have sidewalks that could lead to the bridge. Again, there was some evidence, not overwhelming, of some commuter activity on some residential streets. And if we make commuter-friendly parking on Lincoln and River, those folks parking in the neighborhoods would be more inclined to park on Lincoln and River. That was the thinking.
Okay. And one of the other points about the congestion factors that you had, that clearly on some parts of the day and that it's pretty congested on Raritan. Now, do you have any sense of how long that congestion lasts? You did Friday at 1 o'clock. Is it over by 3? Is it over by 2?
It's short-lived.
Okay.
Very short-lived.
All right. Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you. Sorry. You had mentioned higher daytime parking on the north side, as it was pretty contrasted from daytime on the south side. Is that due? Would you say that that's due to the schools, or and was there any source of that?
I would, based on our observations, I would say it's the schools and there are some religious institutions there with small parking lot. They do spill over into the neighborhood from time to time.
Was there any recommendation for? I mean, I saw the recommendation for metering, but any recommendation for permitting in certain districts?
Yeah, just the exploration of it. In some of these neighborhoods where where we do have some of this overflow parking activity, it is, for example, New Brunswick has residential parking zones. It's permitted. In New Jersey, it's an easy route to do that. But typically you engage the homeowners on that particular block and see what they say. Talk about how, what the options are. Is it all-day restriction? Is it only during certain hours, certain days? There are many different ways you can slice that.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I do.
I'm sorry, couldn't see you.
I know it's hard to see me back here. When it comes to residential parking permits, it would be zoned for that street, or just for that road, just for people who live on that particular street would be able to park there at that time?
Correct.
And that would not be an issue, any kind of bias issue to say, okay, you're discriminating against a person who lives on the other side. I live in the same town, why can't I park there?
Yeah, you usually have to get the buy-in of the majority of the homeowners on the block. So, and again, there are different ways to do it. In some cases, you could say, for example, 2-hour time limit, unless you have a resident station. So residents can park there all day, but everyone else, you can only park there for 2 hours and then you have to pull out. So there are all different types, and it could be on certain days, during the day, at night,
Okay, thank you.
depending on you have to tailor it to what the problem is.
Okay. Thanks, Elsie. Thank you, Ms. Gioso. We appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll be in touch, and we'll be also putting your program slides in, and ultimately, hopefully, the report up for the municipality to be able to view at its leisure. Thank you very much for coming tonight.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Next matter on the agenda before we go
You want
to
me to stick around for
public questioning.
Okay.
We should be there shortly, and thank you.
Is there,
Next
Mr.
on
Chairman,
the,
just a point over, is could it be possible for us to entertain public questions now and then move on to our other agenda items rather than have the public wait around for us to discuss the others? I'm not sure if that's possible, but it seems like if there's public questions, if we're going to ask them about this, we could do it now. I'm not sure.
What's council's pleasure on that? Okay, then we'll open to public comment. Again, as we said in the beginning, state your name and address for the record. The limit is 3 minutes. We will go to, rather than 21 minutes, because of the nature of the report, let's go till 25 after. Let's give it a half an hour. And again, if you've had an opportunity to speak one time, please wait till everyone else has had the same opportunity before you come back up again. Any public comment on the parking report?
This lady in the red hat, she had her hand up for a while. You can just go right there and say it.
Okay. Pass her
My
mic.
name is Wanda Zelensky, and I'm from 243 South 6th Street in Highland Park, New Jersey. And I just want to know if there's any update about Stop and Shop's moving or anything. Does anybody have any update about it?
Thank you, ma'am, for the question.
We're really concerned about it, really
Right.
heartbroken about it.
I understand that many of you may be here about Stop and Shop. Right now, the questions are about the parking study. We're going to get to Stop and Shop.
Oh, okay. You're going to get you at another meeting?
No, at this meeting, just
At this meeting.
after we talk about the
There'll
park.
be a brief discussion of the of the matter by Mr. Baumann. So, are there any questions about the parking study?
Mary, can you hear, is this working?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, Mary Forsberg, 317 Dennison Street. I was very impressed with this presentation you did. It's completely different from what I was expecting. I live on Dennison Street, which is a residential neighborhood, which you all call a transition zone, but for us who live there, it is a place where we live. And I'm curious because the redevelopment plan, you didn't really address the redevelopment plan too much. The redevelopment plan basically wants to build a lot of apartments on Raritan Avenue and build a parking garage where those new people would park with there would be no on-site parking in those new buildings. And so there's talk of a 3 to 5 story parking garage, in front of my house, which of course I'm not happy about. So I'm wondering, you didn't address that really. I mean, I guess you were not asked. I expect you to be talking about a parking garage and minimizing the cost of it, which we know is really a lot. And I'm wondering what you think about building, from a parking perspective, what you think about building apartments and housing on a major street with no parking at all, on site. Will people really walk? Is that your experience, that they will walk in a town like Highland Park to a parking garage all the time? And I guess my final question is, could you, since you do parking, and I think you also do parking garages, can you discuss a little bit the costs of building a parking garage for a town like Highland Park and how that would be accomplished? Let me say, not in terms of parking garages, but I would like to say that this should be a hybrid meeting. I listened to the Borough Council meeting on December 6th, and you can barely hear what people are asking. I listened to a planning board meeting. You can't tell who's talking in a planning board meeting. These should be hybrid meetings because normally there are like a lot more people who listen to the hybrid meeting, to listen to the Zoom meetings. And it's a disservice to our community that everything has to be in person.
So let me just jump in before Jerry answers. Jerry led with the study to explain that this is a baseline that we're drawing. So the purpose of this first study was to set the conditions as they exist today, current conditions, and evaluate those. And so that was the purpose of the study. We did not ask him, and it was not part of his engagement, to analyze the cost of a parking garage, for example, or how many spaces would go in a parking garage, or how far people would walk. For now, we're just trying to understand the existing inventory and ways that we can improve the existing inventory without, for example, a parking garage. So that was the limit of his study, and probably would not be the kind of question you could answer about the cost of garages and things like that. So, but maybe you could address some of the other comments.
Yeah, it's really difficult without knowing what the building program is. Is it, is it 30 apartments, 50? What is the capacity of the site? The various sites to accommodate parking on site. From what I understand, 3 of the 4 redevelopment sites can accommodate their parking demand on site, and the one small site. There's I believe, Track B, I believe that there was discussions that their parking demand would be accommodated on Track D, and that is, from my experience, within a walking distance that residents of the Track B redevelopment would be willing to walk.
Hi, I'm Hannah Shostak, and I live at 146 North 6th Avenue in Highland Park. I found your presentation interesting. What I wasn't sure about, though, what your terms of reference were. For starters, what were you asked to look at? I mean, this was just a baseline, meaning you had no assumptions about whether we had a parking problem or not. It wasn't clear from your presentation to me anyways what you were asked to do specifically. That's my first question. My second question is, are there going to be more parking studies related to the redevelopment tracts? And is this just the first, and then this is the base upon which further parking studies will be done? Number 2. Number 3, you were talking about having a 2-hour limit, but it sounds like the impact would be minimal based on your understanding of how long people park for. So I'm wondering what you think is going to be accomplished if only 10% of the trips cars parked are staying for over 2 hours. And also, do you know how many people are parking for a long time in front of the post office? Because I would suspect, based on my observation, that they're not parking much longer than 15 minutes anyway. And so that your imposing a 15-minute limit isn't going to have much of an impact. So those are my 4 questions.
Let me take the first one. There was a bunch there because I think I can help. The first question was, how do we decide what to study, I think, was your question, right? And so,
what the terms of reference were for this
yes.
study.
So collectively, with the council's input, the mayor, the business administrator, the entire team, we determined that we should clearly study Raritan Avenue. And then we thought it was important to study what we've called the transition areas. So go further into the neighborhoods where anecdotally we were told that there were concerns or issues. So we drew a fairly broad rectangle box, as you could see up there. And that was this frame of reference, as you describe it, that we asked Jerry to study. And then in his study, he put different labels on them, but it was meant to deal with Raritan Avenue and all the impacted neighborhoods that were basically within a block of Raritan Avenue on either side of Raritan Avenue, all the way up to where we thought there might be commuter issues closest to New Brunswick, and then all the way down at the other end of Raritan. That was the frame of reference we gave him. We did not indicate whether we thought there was a problem or not a problem. That was the point of the study. So it was to determine for us, with, as he called it, a cold eye, objective view, come in and study that area. And then Jerry provided his expertise in terms of when to study, how to survey, what survey questions, all that was sort of the expertise that we get using Jerry Joseph's firm and him. But we, together with him, picked out the frame of reference to your question.
And what about the redevelopment?
So for the redevelopment, because we're in the early stages of negotiation, what we shared with Jerry, which is what he reflected here, is we think it's likely that 3 of the lots will park on site. So we just share with him as a reference, but he's not in the weeds in the redevelopment, mostly because it's still in the beginning stages. He certainly had the redevelopment plan, so he was aware of the central garage, for example, so he had all that information. But primarily, we needed someone to have the floor, the basic, the current conditions. So as we, as you asked, come up with redevelopment projects, they have a basis to work off of for the additional studies that you're asking about that will come with individual projects. But we didn't know what the current conditions are, and we really thought that was an important understanding, because as you hear from some people, well, I thought we had a problem, maybe we don't really have a problem, or we thought that maybe we need 2 hour, or maybe we don't. So I think the positive that came out of this is Highland Park doesn't have a major parking problem. We have inefficiencies, private lots that we can't tap into, perhaps Raritan Avenue, having amenities, as Jerry called them, making it easier to park, or people looking into neighbors. So we seem to have plenty of parking. We just need to figure out, and it's going to require cooperation of private property owners perhaps, to best utilize our parking. So the positive was we don't have this major parking concern that perhaps some people think they do. And there's a lot of opportunities to address it if we do. And as the redevelopment projects come online, depending on what their parking needs are, we now know how we can accommodate in various ways. So it just gives us a much better basis of information to deal with each individual redevelopment project as we go forward.
Thank you. And what about the time limits? Considering that it sounds like most people aren't staying for extended periods anyways, what do you expect they will accomplish?
We actually, in those 15-minute stalls that you were referring to, on one of our study days, there was a black car with tinted windows that sat in a spot right in front of the post office for like 3.5 hours. So we did notice that spaces that are supposed to turn over on a regular basis were being utilized by cars that are not intended for that purpose. So.
And yet your numbers on the 2 hours, it sounded like only 10% of cars parked would stay longer than 2 hours, if I remember correctly.
It was 4 hours. So that was that 4-hour threshold. We figured were either employees or downtown residents. But we did notice that those post office space, they're high turnover spots, and we really should have a 15 or 20-minute time limit for folks to go in and mail their packages, pick things up. It's a busy post office, and we thought it was deserving of at least 3 spots, 15-minute limit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Peter Spool, 146 Graham Street. So this is really addressing the redevelopment entity. So this change that the parking of tracts A, C, and D now are expected to be on site, since tract D was supposed to be a parking garage, has the use of that now been changed?
So the plan has never changed. The redevelopment plan, you'll recall, contemplated central parking or not. We purposely drafted it to be flexible because until we went into the market, we weren't sure what we would get, and we wanted to have the flexibility to get the best project possible. So the plan for that D, for example, still could have a redevelopment project, or it could have a garage that's a private property owner. Right now, we don't have a slated redeveloper for that property, but that whatever happens there would have to be consistent with the plan.
And is it true that you're hoping or expecting that then tracts A and C will have adequate parking on site?
Both, yes, expecting and hoping. We think that's what the market might show us as we continue our efforts. So we've designated a redeveloper, as you know, for one parcel. So we're aware, as part of our negotiations currently, what their project they're proposing, and we're working through that. We believe that will ultimately be able to be parked on site.
Thank you.
The second site, we're still working through, but it's a project by project, site by site, trying to get the best project we can for Highland Park. So we're being informed by what the market has told us through the competitive process.
Copperman, 120 Hill Street. I want to reemphasize a couple of things that have been stated here and ask a question. First, on the matter of Raritan Ave as a state route, which is very appropriate to point out. I would emphasize it's not just a state route, it's a heavy pass-through corridor because of access across the Raritan River. And so it's not just a matter of state permission, it's also highly a matter of safety. If you've got the periods of heavy flow, through that corridor, again, passing through, most of those folks don't live here when, at the rush hour times, and you've got lots and lots of people parallel parking because we've reconfigured the parking spaces for more density, you're going to add to accidents and tie-ups and so forth. That's just manifest. It takes no study. It's just obvious, and I hope you'll be very, very cautious about making those kinds of changes to on-street parking on our state route. I also want to emphasize again the matter of this 2-hour restriction, which contradicts the statement that that the bulk of the people in town don't see it as a problem, and the fact that your own numbers back that up. Now, on the question of parking meters, so et cetera, you mentioned it as a potential source of revenue, but you didn't say anything about the costs. The costs of adding in the placing the meters, operating them, collecting the revenue, and enforcement, and then dealing with everything that goes with enforcement, none of which we have to deal with, or hardly any of which we have to deal with at the moment. Have you done any kind of projections of those numbers?
I will tell you that that if parking meters are installed, it will be a net positive net revenue impact for the borough, and those revenues can be used to fund improvements.
And to what extent will it be a penalty on residents versus a gain from pass-through traffic? You're basically saying the cost will come to us. The revenue to the borough, it'll in effect be a form of another tax. To what extent will it be on the residents versus others?
If you choose to park on Raritan Avenue.
Yes, if you choose to park on that, which we, as you demonstrated,
30
we're able
seconds.
to do. So,
Just to finish my point, the side streets and the lots would remain free. So it would incentivize folks to use the side streets and use the lots if you don't want to pull 50 cents out of your pocket to pay.
which would suppress revenue but not suppress cost. I
It
want to
will
know the
open up
numbers.
spots on the street.
So,
Reduce congestion.
let me jump in 1 second. First place, I think Jerry did not recommend parking meters for a revenue item. He's just talking about regulating parking. He was not suggesting it because it
No,
will
that
make us...
contradicts what he said, sir. Absolutely.
He wasn't suggesting parking meters to generate revenue in any event. It's also important to understand that Jerry's job was to give us all the options out there, right?
Okay.
The governing body, I think most of them are for real time hearing these recommendations. Exactly, the professional team, we heard them before, but most of the council people are hearing them with you real time. His job is to tell us what is the world of choices if we so to choose them. This governing body is hearing this with you. They're not making any of these choices today, anytime soon. But they wanted someone to tell us what's the universe of things we could do if we think we have a problem and we need to fix it. And so parking meters is in that universe, but I don't think, we're a long way from suggesting parking meters, I think is what I'm
So
saying.
we're not to the point yet.
No. This is just, Jerry, tell us everything we could possibly do in the world of parking, and this is on the list.
Thank you.
All right, and if no one else, then we'll close the public session and we'll move on to the next item of discussion, which is the preliminary studies with regard to the Stop and Shop area.
Thank you, Council. So this will be a relatively brief report, but so in order to address what is happening at the site of the Stop and Shop, and it's the collective goal of the mayor and the council and everyone that's been charged to by them to make Highland Park as good as we can, to figure out a way to make this site either survive or we want a grocery store to be here and remain here. And if it's not this grocery store, we want it to be another grocery store. So we're singly focused on putting that property in a position where we can have a grocery store within the confines of, we don't own the property, it's private property, and we're just the municipality. So step one of that is to try and put it into the world of redevelopment, which gives us the most ability to either incentivize certain uses or zone certain uses or work with the property owner in a cooperative way to maintain a grocery store or replace the grocery store. Step one is to declare the area an area in need of redevelopment. We've done that in Highland Park. I think we're all sort of now pretty well versed in the process. Study was done, sent to the planning board. They reviewed the study, and they concluded that it meets the criteria. You have to meet certain criteria. And now they're sharing it back with the governing body. I'm just reporting to the governing body that that's occurred. I don't think we're planning on taking any official action. But the next action for us would be to pass a resolution to declare it an area in need of redevelopment. That would be the foundation for us to then do the second step, which will be the redevelopment plan, which you've now sort of experienced on lots of A, B, and C, and D. And that would sort of follow that. So we're working through a path to put us into a position where through redevelopment, we can negotiate with the property owners with the end goal of preserving or replacing the existing grocery store with a grocery store so that a grocery store remains in Highland Park at that location. So this is the next step. Again, no official action tonight, but we did the first step, planning board did the second. It'll be back to us at our next meeting. And from there, we'll begin to develop our plan, which we'll have as part of it, a grocery store. So that's where we are.
Councilman Hale?
I'd just like to add that at the planning board, that the planning board asked a number of questions of the planner, but overall it was overwhelmingly in support of the redevelopment designation. The primary landowners of Stop and Shop, the Landas, as well as the owners of Parkview, also attended the planning board hearing in support of moving ahead with this, and that's a great sign to have the property owners here willing to engage in the process of trying to make sure that we have a grocery store. So we're happy about that process. I do want to counsel that we're not there yet, but we are moving as fast as we can. The planning board understood the alacrity that we needed to move with, and was able to pass it in a single evening, and we'll be ahead with the next steps moving forward. But it's having the landowners there, having them hear the process and recognize that they wanted to be a part of it, I think is a good thing for us to know and for the public to know as well.
Thank you, Councilman. Yes, Councilwoman.
Not that this is much consolation, but last night I was listening to the news, and a number of the Stop and Shops are being closed. I don't know why, but there's a number of them that's being closed, and people have the same concern as we do about creating food deserts, because that's the only shop, major shop we have in town. So, in other communities, people are coming out and they're speaking up against it because it was on the news, and people in communities were speaking like, why is this happening to us? What are going to be put in place here? And luckily for us, we have people that own the Stop and Shop. They're attending and they're engaged. So I think we're at a little bit better spot. Just keep our fingers crossed and that we will get something really good in its place.
Yes.
Thanks, Council President. And I just wanted to add to, and I know this was discussed at the council meeting. I think the mayor had some notes in her report at the last council meeting, but we are also looking at transportation solutions as kind of a stopgap, because there will likely be a gap between when the Stop and Shop closes and when a new store either goes in or redevelopment or you name it, and we recognize there's an imperative to connect people to grocery stores in the area and find other creative ways to make sure that people have access to other groceries. So we're putting a program together internally, going to share it with our council members, and hopefully be ready to share it more publicly early in 2023. So I know that's a concern, and we share the urgency. So just so you know.
All right, thank you. All right, given the nature of the Stop and Shop, I'm going to allow public comment for 15 minutes, again limited to 3 minutes. However, the subject will be limited to the discussion by our special counsel for redevelopment, Mr. Baumann, which is the status of the preliminaries on the redevelopment plan and the progress that was made at the planning board on Thursday night.
Thank you.
Again, 3 minutes. Identify yourself for the record. Please do not seek to speak a second time until you've let everyone speak the first time.
Peter Spool, 146 Graham Street. This is not within the bounds of what you want, but I just wonder if anybody knows when Stop and Shop's lease ends. That, to me, is like the likely time when they will close the store.
Go ahead, Terry.
My understanding is it's June 30th, but the likelihood is the store will close before then, potentially the end of March. That's the last information I was given.
Councilman Hale. Are you looking for 3 minutes, or are you?
No. I just want to be very clear, because one positive thing, many positive things that came out of our economic development discussions is that this is very explicitly a two-track approach, right? We have the long-term approach of setting parameters that are suitable for the community that ensure a grocery store in any redevelopment on that site, but then also moving with urgency to find a new grocery store in the immediate term.
Right.
So that area is way behind when it comes to trucking, refrigeration. Councilman Hale can speak more on that, but I just wanted to, in my mind, I wanted to be very clear that this is that there are two things happening simultaneously. There's this, and then also finding
Just absolutely that all means necessary, right? And we've made that very clear that by any means necessary, we will do what we need to try and get a grocery store as fast as we can, understanding that there are some significant hurdles to making that happen. But we are certainly pursuing. Can we fill it with a tenant, and can we do redevelopment down the road? Can we do both at the same time? All options are on the table to try and make sure that we keep a grocery store in Highland Park.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman.
Hi, Mary Forsberg again, 317 Dennison Street. I'm, like everybody else, I'm very concerned about Stop and Shop leaving, because I think if we lose Stop and Shop, Highland Park has very little to fall back on. But beyond Stop and Shop, if the post office leaves, if they start thinking you're going to develop that area, the post office could leave, the Wells Fargo could leave, a lot of the businesses in that area, and that is a very successful area. And I understand that you are concerned about the Stop and Shop not having a grocery store, but it's not just the grocery store, it's a lot of that whole area, because that is the successful part of our town. I tried watching the planning board meeting, and because of the way the meeting is set up, I couldn't tell who was speaking, I couldn't see the slides very well, it was very poorly organized and really should have been done, again, as a hybrid meeting, so we could have seen who's speaking and who's talking, and see the slides. The other question I have is, you talked about is it the owner of the Stop and Shop store or the owner of the land who was at that meeting?
The land.
The land. And are they local people?
They originally were from Highland Park. They don't live in Highland Park now.
But they flew out for that meeting.
I think they drove.
Yeah, I don't think they live. I'm not sure where they live, but I think they're within driving distance.
Okay. So the owners of the land are interested in redevelopment. What about, have you talked to all of the other businesses in that area?
So as I said, the owner of the place where the post office is and that whole Parkview lot was also at the redevelopment meeting.
And what was their feeling about it?
He was interested in that we were in doing it. He was not jumping at the bit to say yes. He was saying, I'm interested in having conversations and seeing where those lead. But there was no, and to be honest, the focus that we've taken really is on Stop and Shop. The area that we put in the study for redevelopment is because it makes sense because of a geographic area and to square it off at the corners. But again, we're way early in this process. This is simply the first step in the tool kit that we can try and do to get the best that we can for Highland Park.
Have you notified all of the owners within that area? I know somebody whose house backs up against the Stop and Shop. And are you telling them that their house might be part of a redevelopment plan?
There are
30
no
seconds.
there are no houses behind that are part of the redevelopment area. It's only the Stop and Shop lot and all the way up to the corner. So the houses behind that are not in the redevelopment area.
Everybody that's in the area got notice, yes.
All
If
the
you're-
people that live in that area?
Everyone that is in the redevelopment area received notice. If you're not in the redevelopment area, you did not get
Which means
notice.
that if you abutted the Stop and Shop, you did not receive a notice that.
Because you're
that-
not in the
that area is
redevelopment
gonna
area.
be-
Yeah, you're not in the redevelopment area.
I find you should be, all of those people should be notified within 200 feet. That's what happens if you're trying to do something to your house. I mean.
When they come in
I
for,
just-
if you come in for a site plan, they would have to do that as well. Same thing.
I mean, I think that it's appropriate for you to notify people who are within that area.
Time.
My name is Muffin Lord. I live at 250 Grant Avenue. I've been a volunteer with the food pantry for a bunch of years. And all of us are all of the volunteers and I don't know also the clients are very concerned about this. Our numbers, as some of you know, have gone up enormously over the past 2-3 years, mostly because of COVID, but not only. So to not have I'm preaching to the choir, I know that, but I wanted you to hear from and about the food pantry. It's really good to know that you're thinking about the transportation stuff. If there's any ways that we can help, just ask. But we gotta do this.
Is there anyone else? Seeing none, I'll close the public session at this time. I'd entertain a motion on Resolution 2022-02, Executive Session, Redeveloper Negotiations, Tract B.
Move to go to
Council-
executive session.
Second.
Mr. Baumann, for your
Yeah,
opening comment?
we'll be going into executive session to discuss contract negotiations related to redevelopment. We will not be taking any action when we come out.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Hi, Muffin.
Good night.
Thank you.
I know.
Mr. Gioso, thank you so much.
Thanks, Chair.